Hello and welcome. If you're watching this video, it's because you're interested in using the NewGene software. The point of this video is to provide an introduction into the NewGene software and to explain how the NewGene software relates to the precursor software called EuGene. So the first question you might have is, why NewGene? What is the point of this software? Well, the main intent of creating this software can be best represented by this. This is what scholars would call cross-sectional time series data, and it's very widely used, probably the most commonly used data format in political science research. Where, for example, you'll have, or in the example that's up on the screen here, you'll have a country, and for this country you'll have yearly values. And if you were to scroll down, you would then see that there's another country with its yearly values and another country with its yearly values. That would be the cross-section, the country, time series, the year, nature of this data. And then this data would have a variety of variables associated with each country and each year. Well, creating one of these data sets is often necessary to be able to conduct hypothesis testing in a large N manner in political science research or any social science research. But a lot of times political scientists don't want to be spending their time and effort trying to merge together different types of variables to be able to conduct their research. Instead, they simply want to be able to run the tests and be able to analyze and evaluate their hypotheses. So that leads into a little bit of understanding the nature, the origins of the EuGene software that was the precursor to NewGene. The EuGene software was initially developed by these two gentlemen, Alan Stamm and Scott Bennett, and they developed it in order to test the theories in this book, War and Reason, by Bueno de Mesquita and Lawman. In order to test their theories, Stamm and Bennett needed to be able to merge together a variety of different data sets and to be able to conduct a variety of rather complex manipulations to the data. So Stamm and Bennett applied for several and received several NSF grants that allowed them to develop a software called EuGene, which specifically stood for Expected Utility Generation Software. Stamm and Bennett then wrote a series of papers introducing this EuGene software. One of them was a paper in International Interactions, a very widely cited paper from the year 2000. And also the EuGene software was described and discussed in their book, The Behavioral Origins of War. And both the paper and the book are widely cited and have been widely cited because of the fact that scholars have widely used the EuGene software to be able to conduct data management. So what exactly does EuGene do? Well, what EuGene does can be well illustrated by the following flowchart. If you have, say, two different input data sets, they can be read into and processed by EuGene, merged together, and then outputted as a final data set that then the scholar can use to conduct analysis. So for example, suppose that one has a data set that contains cross-sectional data set with, say, the United States and France, and it has GDP data. That would be data set 1 in this example. Then say the scholar has another data set with the US and France, yearly values, and has military expenditures. Well, what EuGene would do is take the data set 1, data set 2, combine them together to give you a data set with both GDP and military expenditures in the same data set. As another example of what EuGene would do is it could take those same two input data sets and create an output data set where instead of the unit of analysis or the unit of observation or the cross-section being a country, it could instead be what we would call a country dyad, meaning country 1, country 2, as well as the year, and then the GDP and military expenditures for both. So, how would EuGene actually go about doing this? Well, the best way to understand that is to actually open the EuGene software. And so here you can see this is what the EuGene software would look like. And the most common function that scholars would use this for would be to go to the Create Dataset tab, click on that, and say they wanted to create a country year dataset. They would click on this, and then they would decide that they wanted to, say, save an output dataset to their desktop, and say they'll just simply call it temporary output. Then what they would decide to do is they would have to go and click on the Population of Cases tabs. And let's say that in this case they wanted to select all years from 1816 to 1825. Now this actually highlights one of the first limitations of the EuGene software, which is it's only year-based. One of the motivations for creating NewGene was to be able to go beyond just using years. The next thing the scholar will want to do is select the unit of analysis. They could select all countries, all major powers. They could select countries within a region. They could select a specific set of countries. But the thing to notice is that EuGene could only allow scholars to select countries. And the reality is that most data, or the direction of data analysis in international relations, is moving beyond simply using countries to conduct research, or I should say the direction of international relations data analysis. It's moving to looking at individuals such as leaders, it's looking at groups, it's looking at organizations, it's even looking at inanimate objects such as GPS coordinates could be a unit of analysis. So this is yet another limitation of the EuGene software, is it's strictly limited to country years. Now, once the scholar has selected the cases that they want to use and they've selected the years, then they can choose their variables. And you can see that EuGene had a variety of variables that the scholars could choose. You have these general variables, polity variables, expected utility, which were very rarely used, alliance variables. And so in this example here, let's say that one chose to use the democracy score variable. One of the other limitations of NewGene, or EuGene, was that these variables, though widely used among scholars, is actually a fairly limited set of variables that can be studied. But for scholars to be able to add new data, it was rather difficult to do. So one of the other new features of NewGene is to make the data input process even easier than what was done with EuGene. So now we'll click OK, and you can see that it's created the data set and it's saved the data set. Now another limitation of EuGene, and one that's maybe not quite obvious, is that EuGene is only for Windows machine. And indeed, this demonstration is being done on a Windows machine. But that's a big limitation because a lot of scholars use, for example, Macs. Some use Linux-based machines. And it can be, therefore, they're not able to fully or easily use the EuGene software. So that was yet another motivation for developing NewGene. So, a few other things worth noting about EuGene is that EuGene was developed by Delphi, was written in Delphi, which is a Pascal-based language. And this is actually an underlying limitation that users of EuGene would not have necessarily noticed, but the actual underlying code for EuGene was very cumbersome. And as a result, that's one of the things that made it difficult for it to be a very flexible software. Again, as I pointed out before, one of the limitations of EuGene is that it cannot handle other types of unit of analysis. It can't handle other time designations other than years. And a big part of this is due to the legacy nature of the software and the coding. So these are some of the motivations for creating the NewGene software and moving beyond the EuGene software. to go away from these legacy-based software constraints, to be able to enable this to be a software that can run on other operating systems. Also, to be able to make this a software that, though we expect it to be still widely used by international relations scholars, that can be more easily used by scholars doing other types of research because of the fact that it'll be more flexible in terms of the unit of analysis and the time units. A final feature of NewGene, and one that will become evident in subsequent videos as I conduct demonstrations, is that it will enable scholars to move beyond just conducting analysis on monadic and dyadic data, and instead be able to account for larger units of analysis. And then finally, we think that this will enable scholars to we think that all these features combined will, and just to emphasize this point again, will enable scholars other than just IR scholars to be able to utilize this software. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening to this short video. And I encourage you to watch the subsequent videos that will be posted to this site, as these videos will explain how to actually use the NewGene software